This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. The meeting has been called to order. We have a verification of a quorum. The meeting has been being recorded. Is anyone online who wants to make a public comment, please fill out comment request form. And is there anyone on the public who wishes to speak?
Dr. Harding, we did send out our survey for public comment, and as this morning at 8:45, no one had submitted a request for public comment through our electronic system.
Okay, very good. And that's noticed to the community, so it's clear, yes?
Yes, it goes out, and I'm looking for Hannah and Matt. It goes out to our list, around 1,100 people or so that's on the list. Correct, yes.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, we have an agenda with some secretary's report, the minutes, treasurer's audit, and investment report, and the NFLP. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 items. Is there an approval? Well, first, is there any adjustments to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented for this board meeting? All right, thank you, Jennifer. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second. Okay.
Okay, who's the second for the record?
Dr. Harding, it
Carol
sounded like
seconded.
Dr. Zingari. Yeah.
Dr. Zingari. Okay, very good. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or concerns about the agenda as presented? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? Hearing none, motion for the agenda has been approved. Now we switch gears over to Kathy Powell, but she's not on the line. Michael, can you handle the secretary's report?
Yes, sir.
Or should I? All right, okay.
Yeah. If you, the first part, first one on there is the minutes to the previous agenda that is attached. Also was included in all of the cloud-based services that we did send out. The last meeting was August 15th. And,
hi, good morning. Sorry.
Is that Ms. Rios?
Yes, this is Milagros Rios from VR. Good morning.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. Dr. Harding, do I have permission to go ahead and mark her as present, sir?
Please. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just going through the minutes. If there's any comments or discussion on the minutes, you know, I guess we could have those at this time.
Right, I would move approval of the August 18 minutes.
I'll second.
Is there a second? Okay, second by Tom. Any questions or concerns about those minutes?
Just for the record, that was Paul.
Yes. Hearing no questions or concerns, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Was there a question or a concern there? No. Okay, then we have membership report. What's that detailing, Michael?
Just to inform everyone, one of the things that since we are, just to give some background, since we are looking at adding a secretary functions, best practice indicates that these right here are some of the sub-agenda items for our secretary's report. So wanted to let everyone know that there's 13 members. Currently, Janet Good is the 14th member, has been sent for the commissioner for confirmation. And so that'll be the 14th member. The concern that I'd like to bring up, and I know that we have a couple of applicants, but with 13 members, only 6 of those members are in the first category, which is individuals with disabilities that use assistive technology, or family members or guardians of the individuals. The percentage is 46, and so that is below 5% below our threshold. The applications that we do have, I know the one that we do have is she reported as a category 2, which is a representative of a consumer organization, and so that means that percentage will still go down more. In looking at the future, it looks like around 5 to 6 members will need to be added for us once Ms. Good, and if the other person is approved, then though it looks around 5 members will need to be added from that category 1.
And what time frame do we need to achieve this goal by?
As long as we've already, because of our report dates to the feds ended on September 30th, and on that date we were in compliance, and so as long as we are in compliance by September 30th, 2019, in which we submit our annual progress report by the last day of the calendar year, so December 31st. As long as we're in compliance by that September date, then we will be good.
Well, then, can we make that an action item for Kathy, who has agreed to serve as secretary, to work with you, Michael, to detail this action item and see if we can get some interviews, some vetting, and so forth done by our June board meeting, so we might be able to do some ratifying or recommendations to the Secretary of Education, because we don't want to fall below our, targeted membership groups.
It has been added, and if I could also make as an action item, Dr. Harding, because we do have a new Commissioner of Education, I would request if we could engage our lobbyists, and the reason why is because just to assist in the facilitation of our processes, because sometimes we've all heard the bad stories of submitting paperwork and your appointments being 6 and 9 months delayed. No, Commissioner Stewart, we had a very good relationship with her, and it took at the most 60 days to get people on the board. And so that's one of the things I do, humbly request an additional action item.
That shouldn't be a problem, and that's covered under our standard contract with our lobbyist.
Yes. Oh, well, he does. He will. Yes, we can make a special request of him to schedule meetings for us.
Right. Okay. Well, then please do. And shouldn't we also, Michael, you and the lobbyists, make a trip to visit this commissioner post-session to introduce him to our issues? And, being a former speaker, he should be somewhat familiar anyways.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's an excellent idea. I know we sent the governor-elect, and now the governor, congratulations. We're here to help you and the constituents of Florida. And so by all means, we could send the same letter and then request a meeting.
Right. And then maybe even emphasize the role the commissioner plays in facilitating our membership needs and identification of leaders, and should he have any recommendations, we would be open to them.
Absolutely. And I know that when he was speaker, he did work with us FAAST in particular during Hurricane Irma issues. And so I do know he knows of us, and so I would be more than happy, for make the acquaintance.
And maybe even reference that in your correspondence. Okay, and could you also give your board members a copy of said correspondence when it goes out?
Yes, sir.
All right.
All that's been recorded.
Very good.
Yes.
All right. And is it reasonable to have that letter go out within the next 30 days?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You
Very
record
good.
that.
Okay. Any other items on our membership? Because it looks like we all have an obligation who are currently on the board to recruit and make some referrals here. And so maybe, a little cheat sheet, Michael, could go out on terms of those categories and who fits where and where those vacancies are for us to help us think of people we may have in our own professional Rolodexes.
Yeah, I just thought of, I will get with Matt and Hannah. What might be good is for us to develop like a recruitment packet for the members, because we do have, we already have like a job description and the interview questions. And so, what we could do is to do a how-to FAQ and then, provide that to the members as a recruitment packet.
Right. Not too complicated. I think we all understand how to recruit. It's just simply, what their role might be and what geographical regions of the state you might be looking for as well.
Yeah, we'll keep it to a page front and back at the most.
Okay.
Aaron, this is
Very
Paul. If I
good.
might add, do we have particular skill sets that we're recruiting for? Fundraising, lobbying, advocacy. We should really, if we're going to go out in a concerted effort to do recruiting, we should basically have, my hope would be that we would be able to identify the skill sets that we're looking to add to the board. Aside from the classifications that are statutorily designated.
Point well taken, Mr. Tobin, and I appreciate that. And so, Michael, let's add that component to it, because I think all four of the ones that Mr. Tobin just mentioned play a critical role in the growth, management, and execution of our mission.
I agree. I know that we do have like check boxes on the application for, if that's included in your skill set. However, we definitely need to bring those to the forefront. And instead of having those as an afterthought on the application, they need to be right up front.
Right. Placing a different emphasis on not only meeting the statutory requirement, but some specific skill sets.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else under the membership report that needs to come to our attention?
No, sir.
All right. Then do we need a motion to accept that report?
This is Tom. I move to approve the report.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Is there a second on that?
This is Paul. I'll second.
Okay. Very good. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carries. All right. Upcoming meetings. I think Hannah's going to give that to us, Michael.
Yes, sir.
So I just listed a few meetings that are coming up just so you can mark your calendars. These two are both onboardable, so May 15th and August 14th. Close to the FAAST headquarters like this one is. And then also a legislative work day at the state capitol. Paul and Jenny were included in our other two, so I'm not sure who's going to be in the next one.
We sent out like an invitation who would like to attend for the public policy. And so we're recruiting. And so we will be letting people know.
And Kathy was as well. And yeah, so just mark your calendars, but they're also onboardable.
Okay, can you repeat those one more time, Hannah, for everyone? That's May 15th and August 15th, is that correct?
Correct.
14th.
August 14th, my apologies.
August 14th, okay. And then the legislative day or week, and when is that, Michael?
March 26th and 27th. That's a Tuesday, Wednesday combination, and that is when we anticipate. We anticipate that to be budget week.
Okay, and then I believe Mr. Tobin and others may join us, and are we working their paperwork and their housing needs and so forth?
Yeah, we've already have the rooms booked, and that we do have a plan. And Mr. Tobin and I actually worked out a time frame for scheduling. For scheduling the transportation, and so we will be engaging that plan as soon as the dates come up.
Okay, very good. Any other issues or concerns regarding upcoming meetings?
Just, are these the only meetings for 2019, or will there be others scheduled after August?
Dr. Harding, may I answer?
Please.
Carol, by the bylaws, the board actually approves the calendar, and so at that August meeting, because that will be the last board meeting of the fiscal year, we will be preparing next year's calendar, and so you will be voting on those dates.
Okay, but that would be for next year, not through 2019. Is that correct?
We would have a November meeting in 2019.
Okay.
Yes.
And that would be our first quarter of fiscal year 2019-20, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So we would vote for our 4 meetings in August for the fall of 2019, winter, spring, summer. Does that make sense, Carol?
Sorry, I had myself on mute. Absolutely. I'm getting mixed up with different organizations' fiscal and calendar years. Right. Thank you for the clarification.
Right. Okay, very good. Okay. All right, and then we've got, moving on to Eric Reed and bylaw updates.
Good morning. You do have included in there the latest, or the first version that you guys are seeing of duties of a secretary. We do not have specific duties written into the bylaws anywhere, so we are in process of creating these. So this is just a first draft taken from some other organizations. Secretary duties taken from just conversations on what fits the FAAST world the best for the secretary duties. So if anybody has any open discussion on this at this time, or any thoughts, concerns, anything else regarding these duties, we can discuss those now and get those implemented into the bylaws for a vote at the next meeting or via email prior to that.
Okay, so this would be considered a rough draft for the secretary function.
Correct. Or a final draft if everybody's open.
Right, final draft. So then it would be up for formal vote and adoption at our May board meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So then if there's any changes or adjustments, members need to get back to you, or is it your expectation that we would opine on it now?
No, that's fine. I mean, if there's any discussion now, that's perfect, or send me any discussion via email or a phone call, and I will include changes as necessary.
Okay, and have you worked with Kathy on this issue?
No, we have not directly worked with Kathy on this. She has a copy of this, but we have not.
Okay. Maybe that's one of those pieces that Eric, you and Kathy could look at it one more time and send it out just electronically prior to, you know, the May meeting, so everyone is reminded to think about it. Is there any questions or concerns with the current 90% build out or final draft as it's currently stated?
If I could make Dr. Carney, if I could make a special request, Carol actually gave me an idea. If anyone is on other organization boards, and if there's some samples, or if the secretary's already included in those bylaws, that might be helpful for us to see as well, because I know, you know, we like to see samples here.
Okay. Well, I know there are a number of people who serve in other capacities, so perhaps folks could send some of that stuff in to Michael and Eric. All righty. Well then, I guess we could make a motion to accept this draft final as written in preparation for the May 2019 meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion 2.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Second.
Second. This is Paul.
Paul, thank you. Okay, questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, hearing none, motion carries. We've got boards, policies, and updates, Michael.
Yes, sir. These right here, today is our due date on these to present. Before I begin, I just want to thank everyone that was on the, this actually, the first started out as a social media policy, and we had an ad hoc committee, and I'd like to thank all the members of the ad hoc committee who came together and to provide us, you know, some recommendations. While we were going through this, we did notice that we need to make a change from a social media policy. And Hannah, since you were, you know, kind of like the co-liaison with this, please feel free to jump in. And so what we need to do is change it to an online communications, because we felt that was a little bit more encompassing of what our intent was. The first item that we did see is that we did notice is that most organizations that we referenced had two policies with this, and one in which was a code of business conduct, very specifically.
Audio.
Oh, are you losing me? Here, I'll put this over here. How is that even better?
Yeah, you were just cutting out. I don't know if it was only me.
Oh, no worries. The first one here is a code of business conduct. Again, this right here was something that a majority of the organizations that did have an online policy had in addition to their online policy. And so it's fairly simple and straightforward that, you know, all members, and when I say all members, team members, as well as advisory council and board members, will conduct themselves honestly and ethically, uphold our values and protect our reputation, and then understand what FAAST expects of you. And so that's where I think going back and, you know, having the, looking at the job description for board members and advisory council members might be, warranted. Make good decisions every day, comply with laws, regulations, and then understand where to go for assistance or guidance if you have questions. And then the rest of it is just a little bit of, just best practice formatting is the reporting and monitoring process. And then secondly is the relationship to other policies, in which we are conducting a review of certain policies to where we can add those connections. And then also a review of the policy. Again, this is best practice that, policies like this, in particular this one, because of a constant change with business climates, etc., need to be reviewed on a regular basis. And I actually put in this one every fiscal year. And so, having said that, I'd like to move on to the online communications policy.
Michael, may I just address the Code of Business Conduct for one moment?
Oh, absolutely.
Please, Paul.
Just with regard to reporting and monitoring on page 1, the second line of the first paragraph says they may report any perceived violation to the executive director or the executive committee. Might I just make a friendly amendment that the executive committee is not a person, it's a group of people. So if we could just direct that to either co-chair, who can then engage the executive committee, just so that it's clear what the lines of reporting are, and then that is would have to be carried throughout.
So is that change clear to you, Michael?
Yes, sir.
So it would be the two co-chairs, and then the executive, and then they would engage
either co-chair.
The executive. Oh.
Yeah, JR,
and they would initiate. Yes, Tom.
On the third paragraph, it says on page 1, the executive director is to report any issues involving team members within 1 week of receiving a report. Who is the executive director reporting to?
Would it be the co-chairs?
Yes.
To the team? To
the executive committee.
Okay.
So if we could offer those two friendly amendments as just points of clarification within the policy.
Right. So there's a motion to make some two friendly amendments to the Code of Conduct of Business. Is there a second?
I do.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? Hearing none. Okay, so Michael, you and Eric will clean that item up under the Code of Business Conduct.
Yes, and if I could, because these were additions, for any additions that we do make, if we could, make those where the members can review and then do like an e-vote after the fact, just to ensure that that we capture the intent of the amendments.
Right, that's fine. I don't think there's an objection there. Maybe within a 30-day notice, so it is activated and live before our next board meeting.
Yes, sir.
All right. And we have
moving on.
Moving on. Go right ahead. Moving on.
Going next to the online communication. The genesis of this is because we do live in the online world is very opinionated, and that we have had a couple of issues, with members posting, on their personal accounts, issues related to officials in the state government. And so this was the genesis of this policy. And again, these are the kind of common sense policies. However, you can see that we actually defined the online communications as any communications basically over the internet, including email, instant messaging, feedback on blogs, contact forms on websites. And those right there typically are like if you go to a newspaper and provide a comment at the bottom, those are the kinds of contact forms on websites that we're speaking of. Industry forums, chat rooms, and social networking websites. And so we have principles of online behavior that transparent, everything's transparent. Here we protect all personal identifiable information, respect and responsibility. And then you can see here is that, our expectations. And it's really, be conscious of our image and that, do no harm to the image. The guidelines then state, some verbiage that you could use, if you are making a comment about FAAST. Also, what our social media policies will state. What our social media accounts will have in it is that, that we are using these for public awareness activities. And I know most of you guys, are followers of us on social media. It also states here that, if you have a leadership position in the organization, that, there's a higher standard for leaders. And so in that perception, basically, perception is reality. And so, if there's issues with, with the leadership, then, those are taken, very, very seriously and probably, pushed to the forefront. Same roughly reporting and monitoring as the previous. And so again, because of the online nature, we do recommend that this policy be reviewed every fiscal year. And so for lack of brevity, I'm sorry.
Paul, you have a comment?
I could offer a friend. Yeah, I've got actually two just quick ones. The first is consistent with the prior amendment to the Code of Conduct and the reporting and monitoring, that the reports of any perceived violation be directed to either a co-chair. That would be in the reporting and monitoring section, and that amendment be carried throughout. The other is just, it seems a bit contradictory under expectations. Item 3, all FAAST team and ATAC members should act as FAAST online spokespersons. And then number 5 is that unless they receive prior approval, they may never suggest they're speaking on behalf of the organization. It just seems like those two are diametrically opposed. So
they are.
I had some comments on some of those as well. I would really encourage us to rethink number 3. Prescribing that the board member should act as FAAST online spokesperson is probably a bit of an overreach. And I would recommend that we change that.
Do you have any specific language that you would suggest, or do we just remove that completely because we have staff-directed folks who are lead on social media for us, and then really it's the co-chairs or the public policy person or the 3 board members who have authority to opine publicly on issues in conjunction with the executive director? Am I missing something there, Michael?
No, sir.
My recommendation would be to change should to may for the board members. You can leave it as mandatory for obviously for leadership or for FAAST employees in the team. But I think for board members, that should be optional.
This is Isabel Potts, your new board member. Hello. And my thought about that is, I think in a way that whole sentence could be struck, you know, or stricken, or whatever the past tense is. Because I think we're talking about different things. Or maybe what we should say is, should be supportive of FAAST in online, or, you know, in online venues. Yeah. Because then the guidelines then tell us how to do that. Either we say, well, you know, I'm a board member, but I'm speaking, you know, I'm not speaking on behalf of FAAST, I'm speaking on my personal, you know, on behalf, like if I go to Facebook and I see something and I want to add a comment, I can do that, following the guidelines. So I think maybe just be supportive of FAAST in online venue, you know. In other words, it would be helpful for us not to go and start, you know, slamming FAAST, because whatever.
I totally agree, but I do want to raise the issue that this really gets a little sticky. You know, I can't speak for Luis, who I know is also very active on different social media platforms, but speaking for myself, you know, I blog, tweet, post all the time about best practices in my area of AEC. FAAST RDTs don't always, you know, follow those best practices. So is that not supportive? You know, we have to just be really careful here. It gets really sticky.
So maybe the solution is to just strike that.
Maybe,
that clause,
yeah.
Because it's not that helpful, really. It's a kind of a wish list, but it just muddies the water.
Any other thoughts from members?
I had one other one on
none.
5, just if we keep that one, just grammatically, it needs to be cleaned up a little bit.
Yes.
Okay. So you've got a handful of wordsmithing, striking, and grammatical issues, along with clarity of kind of who may and may not. So it sounds like that one needs to be tightened up a little bit, and some more work, and sent back out for review by members, Michael.
And Michael, I would add one other thing, and 5, I'm sorry, and that is, since 5 should apply to board members as well. You know, I don't think any individual should be speaking on behalf of an organization unless there's, you know, the proper approval. So.
Yeah, and that was the genesis. That was what we were trying to convey. And so, you know, we'll, you know, as a team here, we'll look at that and try to make that, you know, that sentence, you know, a lot better in terms of suggesting that, because, you know, I know that the body has, you know, provided approval for people to speak on the behalf of the organizations. In particular, a lot of times this involves public policy issues.
Yeah, but Michael, in terms of, as the public policy chair, I don't think that when we're lobbying, first of all, most of that's not going to be done online, and at least in my experience, that's more face-to-face meetings that are being arranged by FAAST, which is de facto approval of the organization. By the organization. The policies that we champion have to be approved by first the Public Policy Committee and then by the Executive Committee and the board. So again, those are consistent with FAAST adopted policies, and we would only be speaking in support of those things. So yeah, I think there's some, for clarity there. First of all, there's a duty of loyalty that every board member has, that they support, even if they personally may disagree with a policy that FAAST is going on. Once a board has taken a vote on something, and even if you're in the dissenting position, you're really supposed to support that position, because it's the will of the body, not the will of the individual. So right.
Well said.
I would suggest that we take some time and revisit this, and whether that involves tabling this for the moment while a ad hoc committee kind of reviews and kind of wordsmiths this again. I guess that's up to the chair. But I would really suggest that, yeah, this does need a bit more work.
So moved.
Well, right.
Hey,
Well,
hey,
then,
JR, this is
it
Tom.
seems like, yes, Tom.
I know there's been mention made of who has authority to speak on behalf of the organization. But would it be helpful if we had like a list of who these people are, what position they hold?
And also
Well,
maybe how they can delegate.
Right.
Because sometimes there may be. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, I work with an agency, and it could very well be that I'm invited to go talk about things having to do with individuals with disabilities with some of the special projects that I run, and that one of the requests is to talk about FAAST. So it would be helpful to know who to contact to say, okay, I've been invited to do this. Here's what I'm thinking of, talking about. Is that okay with you guys?
Right.
If I know that I can
well,
contact the executive director.
Absolutely. In a circumstance like that, working with our executive director would make the most sense. I would like to follow the suggestion that was made or actioned or moved that this be tabled, wordsmithed some more, and brought back to the board for further review. Because there's a lot in this. Okay, so there was a motion for the online piece to not be actioned at this moment, but redirected. Is there a second to that?
This is Tom, I second.
Okay, very good. Any additional thoughts, questions, or concerns?
For the record, who was the first motion?
I made the motion to table.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none. Before we completely move on from that item, do you need a review, Michael, or do you and staff have all the little thoughts that were given in by the board?
I believe we have, all the thoughts, but the other thing too is since it's going back to an ad hoc committee, then, we could cut out, this little discussion, and at the next meeting, begin that meeting with just review of the comments for this.
Very good.
Okay. All right. Very good. And then can that be done with the secretary's leadership member, Ms. Kathy Powell?
Absolutely, and in fact, she was a member of the ad hoc committee.
Okay, very good. All right, so that moves us on to COOP.
Yeah, this is the continuity of operations policy. This is something that has really come to light during the last 3 years. And basically what this states is the guarantees that we will ensure for our essential functions upon a declaration of a state of emergency. What the policy does is we actually define what our essential functions are, the steps that we will take, one, to ensure our human resource safety, and then also to ensure that the organization, our data is secure, our program services that we provide will come back online in a very expedited manner, and that the organization is stable. And so you can see here, we actually, go through some steps for each of them in terms of, ensuring our insurance, our insurance policies are up to date, and that, all of our data is backed up. Other things include that to make sure if there's any issues that we actually can run payroll early, that the comptroller will actually have access to some checks in case we need to make any co-pays. Also, if there's any issues with cash flow, that the comptroller and that the treasurer can implement an emergency plan as they deem necessary, and then also some communication guidelines or thresholds to ensure that the co-chairs are aware of what we're doing. Because of what we have noticed in the past, the policy does state in terms of what our core services, what the primary core service that we will be focusing on is our reuse activities. And again, the reason why is because a lot of issues happen with our constituents losing assistive technology during storms, or not having assistive technology at places that they shelter, where they go for shelter. And so that is the genesis behind the reuse services being our priority. And so that is the presentation. And so by all means, I would encourage discussion, recommendations, etc.
Members, any issues with the COOP recommendations?
Yeah, JR, this is Tom. Michael, did you have a COOP plan before this, or is this something new?
This is something new. So no, we did not. It's something that actually came up after Irma, and that we've started working on this, a little bit before Michael, and so, but Michael really brought this to the forefront.
This is Carol. I have no specific issues with anything in the plan, but just a general thought that we may want to just go through one check through legal or whatever, just to be sure that anything that we're deferring responsibility on, for example, the backup and storage of data and the restoration of that, that we're not legally prohibited from doing that, given our role with the state. I've been in some meetings where that's been an area of discussion, and just to make sure we're on, solid ground there.
Yeah, JR, this is Tom again. Michael, I think this is, very, very, very comprehensive. It includes a lot of information, but I'm looking down at like steps to ensure continuity of data and records, and it says, that the information, will be put will be backed up, on 2 memory devices. I'm looking at like the second one, and then it says, that the second device, will be kept off-site in a secured location. Who knows where that other secured location is if the director of operations is not around?
I know it's Michael. I requested that he, keep that, keep the backup with him on his person at all times. And so that is where, that was. However, one of the things that I think that we can do, we already have one here, is like a safety emergency box. And that could be something that where, we could have one off site, to keep. However, as we developed this policy, one of the things that we did notice is that all of our data is cloud-based. And so, all these systems have multiple redundant, they're very redundant in terms of their backup. And so that's one of the things is, in looking at this, I'm not for sure if we need a secondary one, but definitely, just for the sake of like internet outages, etc. That was one of the reasons why I feel it's a necessity for us to at least have one backup. And I do know that, again, during Michael, Matt is our operations person, and he actually backed up all the data.
And Michael, just with regard to the emergency cabinet that's on site, is that a fireproof, watertight box?
Yes. Actually, right now we only have, right now we only have, Paul, like the little suitcase version of it.
Yep.
And so this is something that we'll have to buy, and will be a little bit bigger, just because there's certain New Horizon loan documents and financial documents.
And who has that? And I guess the second part of that is who has the secondary set? I mean, God forbid something happens to the management team. Who knows where that stuff is and how they can get into it?
Yeah, that was my point, Paul. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, again, I think that the plan is very comprehensive. I think that the policy itself is probably fine as it is, but in terms of some implementing directives and just putting this into practice, probably needs to be fleshed out just a little bit on where things are, who has contact, sort of this is the continuity of operations plan. But the second part of that is, okay, who knows how to implement it and who knows how to restore it? If, again, heaven forbid, the management team.
And to do a practice drill twice a year or so on those particular steps.
Paul, if I could bring your attention to page 4, the reporting and monitoring, it does state in there, upon approval, the executive director and deputy director will develop procedures to present to the executive committee for input, and then basically, as you know, and as you've already stated in certain terms, is that this is a policy, and that, once the policy is adopted, then, we'll get into the weeds. And so basically it'll say Eric, will be the person that puts, well, not Eric, but I'm just saying the deputy director will be the person and have the keys and things like that.
The only other thing that I would add is that this, in terms of a policy, is that members of the executive committee, as they come onto the executive committee, ought to be brought up to speed on this and made familiar with the policies and procedure. Just because of turnover, we pass this today and we don't really have to touch it again for 4 years. The executive committee could have a very different makeup, or the board will have a different makeup than it has today. So this should be an integral part of the new board training, or at least the executive committee training of the new officers.
Absolutely, Paul. Good observation. Okay. So in general then, members, is this something you're willing to pass based on some of the extra little steps, or do we need to table this?
Motion to accept as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to, all right. Motion and a second by Tom. Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none. Okay. Moving on to the differences binder. What's that, Michael?
That right there was something that I just provided. Sometimes there's discrepancy between policy and procedures, and actually it's a great segue from my last comment, is that, policies are fairly, 30,000 feet, and that once a policy is adopted, then, we will begin the process of operationalizing it, putting it into our procedure handbook, and then training everyone on the process. And so I just provided that as an FYI.
Okay, and so that would brief us in the future of how you've moved the COOP and the online and the code of business kind of pieces, the difference between
Correct.
Policy and action. Okay, so
yeah,
you're
actually,
going to
this
use
right
that
here might go well. Yeah, and this right here might go well with Paul. Is this right here could be like as a jumping off point or the beginning point of providing new members and new executive committee members, training on these, on policy.
And okay, and we're going to be getting some new board members here the remainder of 6 months. So we need to get this ready in time for those new members in June, between June and August.
Right. Yeah, and we're planning another orientation, in June.
Okay. All right. So this is just an FYI. So we'll accept the report as provided rather than a formal motion. Okay. All right. So any other items under the secretary, Michael?
No, sir. If I could conclude with, I'd like to thank the members for their vital input. Once we implement this, I feel that these policies will be will be stronger and reduce our risk.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Moving on to Treasurer's report, I'll turn it over to Mr. Tobin.
All right, thank you. I'm going to skip the first. Well, you are used to seeing the financial report as part of the management report. And if we just open that very briefly, you'll see that the management report basically it presents the balance sheet as well as the profit and loss, but it really doesn't give you any source of comparison. So we don't know, for instance, in the income that's being displayed right now, what it was supposed to be versus what it is. As part of the executive committee, some of our executive committee discussions, what we've done is we've reformatted the financial reports. I'll ask that you go to the Excel spreadsheet on the balance sheet. We've reformatted a number of items. This doesn't change the numbers dramatically. What it does is it changes the reporting mechanism. So what you'll see here is as of January 31st, the total operating cash was $391,000. The delta is the difference in the operating account, the increase or decrease from the prior month. So you'll see that the total cash went up $131,000. We've also started talking, and there will be a discussion in the policies as we move forward, about establishing an operating reserve account. So that you'll see $80,000 in an operating reserve in column Z. Basically what those are emergency funds that the organization can tap into if for some reason cash stopped coming in through some of our grants, or if the government shuts down and the federal money doesn't, those checks don't get cut. So it's just part of a prudent business practice to have an operating reserve, and we're starting to move in that direction so that we don't have to keep tapping into investments to make up shortfalls in income, or at least we have a defined amount of money to do so. As we look through the balance sheet, you'll see the total assets through January 31st were $2.955 million in total. The operating accounts decreased in the amount of $122,000 between December and January. And we see that because we moved some of those funds in line 8 up to into an operating reserve, you'll see that the operating reserve is actually increased to $106,130. If we move down the page a little bit more, you'll see everything does come into balance on the balance sheet, which is always a good thing. Liabilities, current liabilities increased only by $1,500, and that's basically bills that are set to pay. The other thing that we have done is we have we've synopsized the current liabilities into the accounts payable, the different credit cards. The P card is, the P card is going to be eliminated in the near future, and we'll be going to a credit card with defined limits, so that we can take advantage of some credit card offers, 2% cash back, things of that nature. It's not a lot of money, but it does help. Every bit does help, as long as we're not, paying fees for those cards. Are there any questions on the balance sheet? Hearing none, we'll move to the profit and loss. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
I would like to take a moment of the prerogative of the chair and to publicly thank Mr. Tobin for his leadership and kind of reorganizing and making some really smart suggestions to the whole set of financials. So thank you so much for your leadership on that issue, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate that. If we look at the P&L summary by month, again, what we've done is we've taken the full year budget broken down into our projection for what we would expect to see each month from each of these lines, and now we've got a benchmark from which we can measure progress. So on the management report, what you would have seen is revenue from grants and contracts of $22,000, but you'd have no idea what that was in reference to or what that was being measured against. We had budgeted $11,500, and so we beat our revenue from grants and contracts by $10,600 this month. You'll also note that there's a note column off to the side, and that tells you where those deviations occurred and what the explanation is. So basically, the step-up grant, we had an increased step-up grant for the month of January because of increased consultant expenses. The indirect invoice, the indirect costs are 10% of that number. And so you see where those deviations occur. If we move down a bit, you'll see revenue from the board or from revenue from donations. There are a number of board items that are in our annual budget, which was approved by the board, and yet we're not necessarily seeing those numbers materialize. Some of that is timing, but nonetheless, just so you see. So when we look at revenue from donations, we had projected to bring in $2,300 in the month, and we've brought in $265. So we need some work in the revenue from donations area. As we move down a little bit more, we've had the executive committee, the accountants, Whitney, Michael, and I have been talking about line 33. We are reporting on our profit and loss, unrealized gains and losses. So here it looks as though we came up with $94,000 this month against a projected income of $15,000. And while that may be true on paper, those are not funds that we can spend because those are unrealized portfolio gains. It doesn't become real money until we sell something out of the portfolio. So this is a bit of a specious number. It doesn't really mean anything. And yet what it does is it makes it look like we had a gangbuster month from revenue from investments. And that's just really not the case because those funds can't be spent until we actually sell something from the portfolio. So what we have talked about at the executive committee level, I've spoken with Whitney and Michael and the accountants about, is basically keeping this reporting mechanism for the remainder of this year so we have continuity of reporting throughout the year so we can see where we're going. But you'll see at the very bottom, I actually adjust out this number so that we can see what really happened in the month because $94,000 did not come in. That's only a paper revenue. we'll get to that adjustment as we go down. So we look at let's go back up to total revenue. Sorry. Back up at total revenue, we had $119,000 that is reported, but 94 of that is not real cash. So that means that $119,000 is actually more like $25,000. And the projection, so this again is where those numbers, if we really adjust them to actual cash that came in, we actually do not have a favorable variance of $66,000. We have an unfavorable variance of $13,000. So and again, I'll show those numbers later on, but this is why what we're trying to do is basically we lost money in terms of revenue against our budget. We had an unfavorable variance. And yet, if we look at the financials, the way they were being reported or way they are being reported with unrealized gains and losses, it looks like we're having a gangbuster year, and when in fact, it's not a real number. Yeah, we're really not. The only thing that's real, that is absolutely real throughout this entire thing, are always the expenses, because those are bills that are coming in. So as we move down, we'll see that our expenses, our contractual expenses, were higher this month than expected, but that was due to higher audit services. You'll see that in line 56. You can see each line, whether or not you have a favorable or unfavorable variance. We do have a number of favorable variances when it comes to expenses. So we're doing pretty well there on expenses, or at least on cost containment on the expense side. State level activities, we had a favorable variance of $10,500 from leadership activities. We had an unfavorable variance of about $10,000, basically washing those gains and losses on a monthly basis out. Equipment expenses, we had an unfavorable variance of $225. Operational expenses, we had a favorable variance of $727. And personnel expenses, we had an unfavorable variance of $6,189. In total, our expenses were $13,000 higher than we had projected, and the income, as I said, did not materialize. So if we look at line 138, that's how it's reported on the management report, is that we lost $25,000, or that $25,000, there was a deficit in the budget this month against a budget of 78. And that has a $53,000 unfavorable variance. When we adjust for the unrealized gains, which were shown above, in reality, what we had was an unfavorable variance of $121,000 for the month, which is $94,000 worse than the budget. Actually, I'm sorry, the budget was that we were projecting a monthly of unfavorable variance of $94,000. So in actuality, we had a deficit of almost $134,000 against budget. That's the more accurate number when we, as a board, are looking at the operations and why we really have to beef up our fundraising and diversify our sources of revenue and look for other ways that the organization can bring in some cash. So those are the financials. There's one other report which I will just briefly go over for folks so that when you see it, you know what you're looking at, and that is the profit and loss by account number and month.
Paul, this is Michael.
Yes.
If you could just briefly mention about the budget, we have talked about going to a cash flow budget, because we do know of certain expenses in certain months, and so basically,
right.
You know, our projections right now are divided by 12.
Yeah. So what we've done is, if we can go to the next, we have the other report, the P&L summary by month. Yep, that one. Now I know that. Nope, that's not it. P&L by account. All right. Now I know that this is a microscopic sheet, but basically what you can see here is how we take the budget and break it down by month, what we are projecting to happen. So to the left of that gray line, months October through January are the actual numbers as they've come in from October to present. And then to the right of that is what we're projecting we should have for the remainder of the year. All the way to the right on column AF is the budget that we have for the year. And column AD is what we project at the year end. So that basically adds up everything that's actually happened plus everything that's projected to happen. Budget never changes. Budget is the number that was approved by the board. And then column AH says where we are basically against budget. Are we meeting it? Are we not meeting it? And of course, that number becomes much more accurate as we get further on in the year because projections become reality. So this gives us, and this will be a much more useful tool. So if we look down, for instance, in the lines 23 to 20, all the board-related donations, for instance. To the right of that gray line, everything is very linear. We're going to bring in $416, almost $417 a month in the statewide device loan program through the board. To the left of it, we see what's actually happened. The board has not generated statewide device loan donations. And so the $5,000 that's projected at year end, if we started meeting the flat line budget from this point forward, we'd only reach $3,333 or 67% of budget. So if we want to meet that budget, we've really got to step up to make that a reality. So this is why I find this is a very useful tool as a treasurer or as an executive director, because I can start seeing where there are gaps in what I thought was going to happen versus what's actually happening. And it kind of, it encourages the executive director, it encourages the board to work toward the financial goals that we set at the beginning of the year. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns with the reporting, either the reporting method or obviously with the report itself?
This is Isabel. There's a lot to take in, but one of the things that would be helpful for me maybe would be to have, like at the end of each month, a subtotal of the costs to date, and then similarly at the end of the fiscal year, also have kind of a, oh no, you do have the projected year end, so never mind. But just an actual, expenditures to date. I think that looking at this month by month makes some sense, but it's not as helpful to me.
So you want the actual, expenses to date as opposed to, okay.
Right, like,
Yeah, we can
for
certainly
example,
do
between January and February to put a kind of a subtotal through the end of January.
Yeah, we can certainly put in a year-to-date column. Basically what all of our expenses. Okay, happy to do it.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns with regard to the financial reports?
I don't understand the category you were talking about in 24, the board statewide device loan. What is that different from board general donations or generated donations?
As I'm the treasurer who was given this budget, I honestly can't tell you.
Okay. Well, maybe
Michael,
maybe an email explanation from somebody who knows would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, if you could kind of expound what the expectations are financially for the board on lines 21 through 25 in this. what are where are the board expectations in terms of fundraising?
Well, just to go back for the clarification, in previous years, the board wanted, the board is required to do donations, and so what the board decided is to break it down by category. And so you can see where we have like monthly donations, which is the reoccurring donations. The travel check donations is when people donate their travel reimbursement back to us. And then the statewide device loan and other core services, those were budgeted this year as a project. And so, again, because we're kind of, this has historically been an issue, fundraising for us. And so in the budget, what we did this year, and I just want to make sure that I have the numbers, is that what we wanted to do this year is to develop a sponsorship packet, and in particular have that sponsorship packet focus on the statewide device loan, because it's a tangible product that that you can see the immediate need and the immediate response of. And so what we did with that, I believe the total number, and I have to look at the budgets or add these up, is like $15,000 with the board required to get a percentage of that, raise that, and then the staff required to raise the other percentage. And then you also see here, through our online donation portal, individuals can decide what something goes to, or to what function it goes to. And so if you look at line 30, you can see where it says rainy day fund, and those right there are from our online donation portal. And the person who donated that selected our rainy day fund. And so again, in looking at this in a holistic approach, and then Paul, correct me if I'm stepping out over the line here, but to me, it's possible that rainy day fund, we might want to start looking at, putting that or transferring those into our reserve accounts, because that's basically, when we did this, was the idea of that rainy day fund.
Well, yeah, that seems to me to be what you've done is you've done a donor restricted donation, basically, to that fund, which we're now calling an operating reserve. So it would be appropriate for that $200 or so to be transferred to that, or at least earmarked into that operating reserve account, in my estimation.
I'm sorry, Paul, could you repeat that?
Yeah, there's the donations. There are 4 donations that have been made into the rainy day fund at this point, from line 30. That's $75. It's $178.18. That $178 should be earmarked into the operating reserve. If somebody has gone online and said they want to donate to a specific fund, they put a donor restriction on it. Donor restriction says what it can be spent for. The rainy day fund is what we're also calling, I assume, the operating reserve account, because we really don't have a rainy day account unless we want to name it that. So.
No, that was at the one time, that was what we were directed to do. That was the terminology that we were, directed to use. And so I know that the intent of that from previous boards for that rainy day fund to be a reserve fund. It wasn't overtly stated that way, but I'm fairly certain that was the intent, because I know with those discussion, reserve, the term reserve was never mentioned. But I do know that the discussions centered on all of the other terminology that we've talked about in terms of the reserve fund.
Okay. We're getting tight on time, so
Right.
just because we've got still have quite a bit ahead of us. Is there, as far as the financial report, are there other questions? If not, people, you're all more than welcome to email me directly with any questions or concerns with the reporting or suggestions on how to report in a better way in the future. We will add the year-to-date numbers in there in these reports as well.
Well, I would move, Paul, your treasurer's report or review of financials, items 1 through 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, I can move on if you'd like.
Well,
Review of
do we
investment.
need an right, but before we get there, can we have an acceptance of those financials? Or do we need to do it all 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the larger bullets? I guess I'm looking at the sub bullets.
So is there a motion to
Have
accept?
we looked at 5?
No, we haven't looked at 5 yet.
Right, okay,
Yeah,
so let's
why don't we
do
look at that
accounts
first?
receivable, and then let's go ahead and adopt those. So if we could, Paul, item 5, accounts receivable.
Yeah, basically, this is a new report that I've pulled together that basically says what, first of all, the reports that we were getting were all in a cash basis as opposed to an accrual basis. I've never worked in a cash basis before other than in my home. So basically what this is, the accounts receivable report says how much money is outstanding, is owed to the organization. This should correspond with the number on the balance sheet as far as accounts receivable. So in our accounts receivable report, we're owed $309,181. And this is just a detail of what that, where those funds actually are, which accounts owe. So we are owed $175,000 from DR, from HHS, and another one, 111 from the General Revenue Fund. Step-up money, looks like we actually owe some step-up money back, it looks like. That's what a positive number on a AR account means. And some staff reimbursable charges, things that we expect people to pay us back for those, as well as some assessments money due. So, and then what this report does is it basically lets you know, it gives you the detail of who owes you what money on a month-by-month basis. You can see who's paying on time, who isn't, and whether or not we're actually billing on a timely basis for services rendered. So, final on the accounts receivable, unless somebody has questions.
I think that's a fabulous report and a good addition to help us understand where we're at. Paul, could we get a little input on why we have to give money back? What objectives are we not meeting on that step-up grant?
I will defer to Michael or Whitney on that one.
Yeah, I'm not for sure, Whitney. Yeah, go ahead.
So for this particular month, we had billed the December invoice and had been paid for it, and then we had the accounts receivable for the January invoice. So we received December in the month of January, and then we had an invoice out. So that's a wash between the two invoice amounts, is I believe how that number looks that way.
Okay, so that's a net between 2 months.
Yes.
All right, so it's not a failure to deliver services.
No, sir. Step up is a reimbursement based on the cash that we spend.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, then going back to the earlier piece, I wanted to move items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 under the review of the financials.
So moved. This is Isabel.
All right. Paul, it's in your court.
Yeah, I mean,
Any questions or concerns? All right. Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Then we've got Paul, back to you, and Renee for a review of investments.
yeah, I don't think Renee is on the line, is he?
No, we're here.
Oh, you are here. Okay.
Yes.
So, good to speak with you. Renee is the investment advisor employed by FAAST, who oversees our portfolio. I had the opportunity to meet with Renee the last time I was in Tallahassee. So I will let you give the that report to begin with on basically where the portfolio is and the volatility and changes that we've seen in the market in the first quarter, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much for the opportunity, everybody, to present. It was a pleasure to meet Paul when he was up in Tallahassee and get to know him. You have a really good treasurer amongst you, so that's we're really excited to work with him, and are of course grateful to continue to work with the board and Michael and Whitney and the rest of the team. So again, thank you for your business. Thank you for everything that you do for your constituents. Our report, just to keep it very direct, last year was a down year for pretty much every asset class. Your account from January 1 to December 31st was down 7%, which is just about the average for this mix of assets. Actually, it's a little bit better. And no one panicked, at least not that we got a call from. I think it's good that, of course, you're changing some of your accounting methods, because just like Paul said, these are unrealized gains and unrealized losses, and it's only real when you have to cash out. And so so in terms of last year, again, it was a down year. The only market that was up internationally was Qatar, and so we weren't going to take the risk of investing our 100% of our clients' money in Qatar, which just in case, of course, hindsight's 20/20, but just in case that didn't work out. So we, of course, adhere to diversification and low costs. Diversification is very important, and it does allow you to absorb some of those shocks that happen, especially in a year like last year. But because you held steady and because you held to your investment policy statement, we did not get any panic calls or emails from anybody. As of last night, so year to date, from January 1, so like I said, you lost 7% last year, you're already up almost 7% for this first month and a half. And of course, we want the trend to continue, but we'll never make any guarantees or promises with that. And because you held steady and you held steady to your investment policy statement, and no one sold out any assets in anticipation of a market movement in one way or the other, the markets tend to really reward the patient. Your trailing 3 years return, so what the trailing number means is that we look at, as of last night, February 19th, so going back to February 19th of 2016, your trailing average is roughly about 7.5 to 7.7% a year. Your stated goal in the investment policy statement is that you're really looking for net returns, and these are net returns, net of all expenses, be it funds, be it management expenses. You're aiming for 4 to 6% net returns. And so, of course, you take the good years and the bad years, and you've had some very good years since we've been working with you, and just in terms of the markets. since we've worked together, we've had 2 negative years. One was 2015, and one was last year. But even with that, you're still averaging well over 7% a year net of all expense. So unless your priorities are changing as a institution, you know, what you've always directed in terms of this money, it's meant for in perpetuity. We would not recommend any changes to an investment lineup. You made changes last year. If you recall, there was an amendment to investment policy statement that that was revised and accepted on March 12th, and that allowed us to really just diversify the portfolio even further with international. And you know, in terms of certain countries that are growing faster than the United States or developed countries, we have emerging markets and developed countries that you already had some exposure, but we increased it just to keep up with a traditional mix of your asset classes. So that was the change made last year, and at this point we recommend no further changes. So, you know, I welcome any questions or comments that anyone may have.
This is Paul. At the December executive committee meeting, we were looking at the portfolio, and if you'll recall, November and December were incredibly volatile months in the market. And on the financials, as I said, we were reporting unrealized gains, or we are reporting unrealized gains and losses. And so for those months, we saw fluctuations of, you know, we saw a negative portfolio, change of, I think, and this is from memory, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but on the scope of $100,000, $150,000, somewhere in that range, in a single month. And so we started, as treasurer, I started looking at how are we invested, how are we reporting. In my discussions with Renee last month in Tallahassee, I feel much better about the portfolio mix than I did. I have a much greater insight into the portfolio than I did before. We are diversified on different types of classes. We're different types of equities, different type of mutual funds. We're in value. We are in growth. We are in domestic. We are in some international. So the portfolio is well balanced in terms of weathering the market's fluctuations. As long as we stick to our investment policy statement. I don't know what our beta is for the portfolio or for each fund within the portfolio or in the aggregate, but I feel much better having spoken with Renee. Our expenses are low, and I would suggest that we not make any changes at this time.
Any other questions or concerns?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. This was Renee. Yeah, Paul is absolutely right. You are diversified, and we can always get you standard deviation numbers, Paul, if you ever want them. We run that just kind of on a firm-wide basis occasionally. So that data is definitely available if you're ever interested. But in terms of this portfolio, it's right in line with the beta numbers, and the standard deviation numbers are right in line with what a 60-40 portfolio should be. And remember, being that we're not an active manager, we adhere to evidence-based investing and more of the passive approach, which rewards the investor, because if we're doing this actively, you react poorly to events that over the years since we've been managing your investments, we could have made some very bad calls, knee-jerk. We went through Brexit together. We went through last year together. There's always been something. And because you held steady, you're getting rewarded for it, and that's why you're getting a net return of well over 7% in the last 7 years. So, again, thank you all for the opportunity. Yeah.
I mean, just as something to anticipate, Brexit is going to happen in the near future, and it's going to have a ripple effect across the entire EU. And so we are going to see international volatility in the coming weeks. It's just, I don't think it can be avoided. But again, I think that in terms of our, the effect that it'll have on our portfolio, as long as we hold steady, it'll be, I mean, to the extent that you can say that you can read the market, I'm not of the belief that it's going to have a significant long-term negative effect upon our portfolio. Are there any other questions with regard to the investment portfolio or for Renee? Renee, thank you very much.
None, I would.
Yeah, thank you all very much, and we we wish you luck in this next legislative session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. As always, we appreciate your leadership.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it very much.
Okay, I would move acceptance. Yes.
I don't think
audit report, Paul.
I don't think we need, unless anyone objects, I'm just going to move on. I don't think we need to go through a motion to accept the investment because we haven't made any of the investment report. We haven't really made any changes. With regard to the audit, we are in the midst of having our fiscal year 2019 books audited. Whitney and Michael have been working with our auditor and our accountant, Rebecca. They're working with Jason Norris of the James Moore and Company, who has been our auditor for a number of years. Questions that have been presented by the auditor have been responded to by Rebecca, Whitney, and Michael, and the last indication is that all of their questions have been asked and answered to their satisfaction, and that we're anticipating a clean audit moving forward. Some of the findings that they did have were they asked for us to adopt some financial policies, mostly around the cash deposit policy, who records cash, who records checks as they come in versus who's actually making the deposit, basically making sure that there's a check and balance. And that policy is in development. They've also asked for a procurement policy, and we have a sample that's in the financial report there. These are still draft forms, and I certainly don't think that we're not ready at all at this point, ready for adoption, as well as an operating reserve that we've discussed in the financial report, creating the thresholds and authorities that are necessary. The threshold is how much money do we want to put it into an operating reserve, then of course how do we want those reserves. We don't want to tie up those reserves should they be needed, so they shouldn't be in any sort of long-term investment that makes it illiquid, defeats the purpose of having an operating reserve. And then the last is the procurement policy. How do we contract for services? How do we purchase items? Do we go out for bid? When we do purchase services, or is it a firm fixed price contract, or is it cost reimbursement? So all of those things are going to be in discussion. I'll be working with Michael and Whitney to draft those up and get those to the board for its consideration in the future. I've also included in there an acquisition and contracting policy that I drafted from the Homeowners Association, the treasurer of that as well. So you'll see that in there, and that is just as an example. Certainly everything is open for discussion before we conclude. Are there any questions with regard to the audit, where we are with that? Obviously, once the audit and the management letter come out, we will get that to everybody, as well as the 990, basically the income tax return for nonprofit organizations. Any questions or concerns with regard to the audit? Michael, Whitney, have I left out anything on the audit that you'd like to
No, Paul, I think you summed it all up. Thank you.
I have a question about the procurement policy. Is what you gave us, is this just kind of a sample, not really any new work that has been put into it at this point? Or is this
sample,
like...
the sample, it appears, I believe the sample basically came from an online search. It's from the University of North Carolina government.
Yeah, now I see it, yeah.
It's just a uniform. And I'm not sure that we necessarily have to, whether or not we're going to gear this toward the federal, unless there was guidance from the auditor that I'm unaware of, whether or not this has to be geared toward the federal funds that we receive or the state funds. I mean, this one is heavily...
I believe that even with the federal funds, the requirement is to follow. Are we, is FAAST a quasi-governmental entity? It's created by state law, right?
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
It receives federal matching funds.
Okay, so it seems that the procurement policy, and is it subject explicitly or implicitly to the procurement requirements in, what is it, Chapter 287 or something?
Yes.
Anyway, okay, all right.
I would say affirmative to that.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is because, yeah, there's some certainly the exceptions for the purchase of assistive technology is a big one. So, yeah, okay, thank you. In other words, not having to go out for an RFP and stuff.
If I could, yeah, I just wanted to provide these as, you know, as samples to where, you know, the members could see, you know, this is not the finished product, but, you know, it'd be very, you know, the end product will be similar to what the samples are, just to, you know, give like a little roadmap or, you know, the starting point of this process.
And then are we looking to ratify this process by June, Michael? Or Paul?
I mean, I think certainly for the next board meeting, we can have the sample both drafted and distributed in advance of the next meeting, of the next board meeting. Because I'm sure it's not everyone's wish to read a 9-page procurement document on the fly. So
I would concur.
We'll add that as an action item that will have a draft distributed, say, 2 weeks prior to the next board meeting. Is that okay with you, Michael?
Affirmative, yes.
Is that all right, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely. Good call, Mr. Tobin.
All right. And with that, that concludes the treasurer's report from my perspective, unless anyone has any further questions or concerns. The only other item would be Eric reporting on the state financing report on the NHLP program.
So you do have a portfolio summary. This is a little different than what's been reported at prior meetings, but I just am giving you guys a snapshot of where we are currently with all of the loan portfolio. Currently, you'll see we have 59 loans that are active and on the books. And this is all on page 3 is kind of the summary. Those loans accumulated a $444,000 of approvals, and the principal balance total right now, as of 1/31, I believe this was $317,000. All in all, it's a great portfolio. You will see those the big empty space towards the right half. Some of those numbers in there, those are some past due concerns that we have. So for a 59 loan portfolio, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 loans currently that have past due concerns. most of those are handled, and there's specific situations behind those, and borrowers are working to get to a good place to begin payments. We do have one that is under legal action right now, where we have we've spent some money. We've got an attorney involved, and they have actually filed a claim in court against this gentleman who does owe us about $22,000. So we have a good reason to spend some legal dollars on that one. We're also working on kind of trying to come up with a plan with our attorneys to formulate a lower cost option to go after some folks who maybe default on lower dollar loans, where under normal legal fees, it doesn't make sense for us to get an attorney involved to contact them, trying to come up with a kind of a flat fee situation where they'll give us some discounted rates to at least make contact on a legal basis to try to collect some of these smaller loans. But all in all, the program is moving forward strong. We've got about 12 loans in the pipeline right now that I'm working on. So more and more referral sources keep popping up, and people are certainly using the program and making the best of it.
Mr. Chair, question.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Of our 6 defaults, are there any patterns or something in there that we could glean from that would make meaningful policy and procedure enhancements to perhaps lower some of our risk? Because being owed $22,000 is pretty real, but maybe some of the smaller ones aren't as significant. But when you add them up, what is that total exposure that we could potentially eat in this entrepreneurial business model of ours?
Well, to answer the first part, as far as patterns, no, there really is not. It's, as you know, Dr. Harding, most of these we approve based on good credit, current credit records. Obviously, there's always some issues and there's some concerns, and we try to get as many people approved as we can. But it really seems like most of the past due issues stem from things that happen down the road that we can't predict. And it's just a matter of our patience a lot of times with letting people work through situations that come up, and then they're able to get back on track. It's certainly a determined group of borrowers who want to pay us for the most part, and we have seen a few that surprisingly come up that kind of lose that willingness down the road. So I don't see a pattern with it. I don't know of specific policy to avoid any charge-off situation, because we've had good credit and bad credit, very strong credit people that have gone south on us. So it's hard to pinpoint a specific reason.
Right. Okay. And then I guess a follow-up in terms of keeping our books solid and our balance and this innovation moving forward, do we know of a cap, or like we shouldn't be overextended by, say, 20% of our encumbered capital or 30%? How people have those traditional kinds of benchmarks out there?
Yeah, we haven't set a strict dollar amount for that. Really, it's so much is based on the performance of investments, and as we just heard, up until this past year, investments have really covered any concerns that we've had. So there's not a strict benchmark. The overall default rate for programs like ours is about 3%, and that's of the loan numbers, not the dollar amount. So it's hard to pinpoint a specific dollar of what we can absorb. And as long as we have investments that perform strong for us, then we're in good shape. Is that a number we could calculate? We put a target on? Yeah, we could probably, as a committee, figure out a target that we want to avoid and try to manage it at that level.
All right. maybe that's something for the committee to kick around and just come back to the board, and considering the volatility of investment and Brexit and other kinds of issues, you know, what's just what keeps us comfortable, right?
Very good. That'll be on an agenda.
Mm-hmm. That's all. That's my only questions. Well, do we need to accept that particular piece of this report? Well, I would move approval just as a default measure.
Yeah.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the New Horizon Loan Program?
Aye.
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 Okay. Any nays? Hearing none. All right. Well, that, I think, concludes our board meeting. Mr. Tobin, thank you for your leadership there. Is there any items that I'm missing, Michael?
Well, my stuff,
Oh, yes,
I'm
we
okay
got
with
a
that.
director. Sorry, I apologize. All right. So we have the director's report.
Yeah, since we are running over, I'd like
Motion to extend by 15 minutes.
Well, I'm comfortable with that. Is everybody else?
You have to have a second.
Yeah.
Already did there with the motion. You have to have a second. Yeah.
Yes. Well, there's a motion by Paul. I would second it. Okay.
I motion to.
All. Okay. Any nays? Hearing none? Okay, we have 15-minute extension. Thank you, Paul. All right, Michael, the executive director.
Without further delay, Hannah, would you inform the members of our upcoming events that aren't board meetings?
Yeah, so we have a few events that FAAST is attending in the upcoming quarter and a little after. We just wanted to post the ones that we're sure of now, but there will be more added to the list as we know about them. So DC Day, the Developmental Disability Awareness Day at the Capitol is March 20th. Children's Week also at the Capitol is March 24th through 26th. Florida Senior Day also at the Capitol is March 26th through 27th, so a busy month at the Capitol. Sportsability, our partner FGOA, their annual event at McClay Gardens in Tallahassee is April 11th through 13th. Florida Conference on Aging in Orlando is August 19th through 21st. And the annual Family Cafe that we go to every year is June 7th through 9th. And of course, there'll be more added as we know about more.
Thank you, Hannah. And then next is our public policy, and Jean wasn't able to join us today. Paul, would you like to give the good news that we received yesterday?
We have been seeking a House sponsor to add $150,000 to their budget request. We have such a sponsor, Spencer Roach, who is a representative from the Lee County area down here in Southwest Florida, has agreed to put $150,000 in his budget. And yesterday we received a House Bill number 4611. So that is on the agenda. We also have a Senate champion in Kathleen Pasadomo, who is a powerhouse within the Senate, and she is also from this Lee County area. She happens to be my senator. So we've made some significant headway in terms of the issue as far as getting funding for a new Southwest Regional Demonstration Center.
How did it happen that they're both from Lee County?
It's my charming wit.
Good job, Paul.
All right. Score one for the new guy.
Really?
Yeah, actually, he's been a little bit modest. He presented at the Lee County delegation meeting, and actually our funding request is actually a Lee County delegation request. And so we have all the legislatures from Lee County in support of this. And so that is a huge coup. And mainly the reason why is because it also includes Senator Benequisto. And so she carries a lot of weight as well.
What did you tell him, Paul?
Well,
In the interest of time, I won't get into specifics.
right, but this goes into the board should be proud of itself, because about 2 years ago we raised this issue. We specifically recruited a leader in that area, and those combined efforts have now put us in the game for bringing a new RDC on board starting in July. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
In moving forward, the Public Policy Committee met yesterday, and the majority of the meeting focused on informing the committee members of what we, of our bill number, also looking at what bills that we to support this upcoming session. And so there was 4 bills that was discussed, and actually they are out for a vote now. And all of them, all of them does have a direct correlation to assistive technology. Some of these have been the ones that we have championed in the past. The first is an at-risk adult alert. What we're asking for the committee is to support the bill, and then secondly is to propose some changes that would require Medicaid to include some CPT, some coding changes in which these rescue devices will be an allowable under Medicaid. The second one is voting machines. The committee, again, our recommended action is to support the bill, and then what we will be proposing is if a person needs an accommodation at a poll in terms of electronic voting and using assistive technology, switch accessible voting machines, text-to-speech voting machines, that is requested in advance. And then our third request is that we work with the Department of State when they certify electronic voting machines in order for us to provide technical assistance services on these machines. Because this past year we actually got a call from a county that needed technical assistance because they had a person, a high quad, that wanted to vote and wanted to vote independently and privately and use a sip and puff switch. And so because of the powers that be and the close security that are on voting machines here in Florida, we were not able to do that. The third one is an assistive and independent living task force that is being created by this bill. And so we're asking to be included in the bill because it does, like our piece of legislation, there's requirements to be on the task force. And so we were left off. And the reason why I think it's vital is because that the task force is looking at architectural barriers and other factors. And so we did get permission. I did request, and she granted that she would not block it, and that's the executive director of APD, Barbara Palmer. and the Senate sponsor has also agreed to it. And so our last thing is that we need to go to the House sponsor. But before it's official, we needed it approved. Number 4 is disabled parking permits. And we've had a lot of discussion concerning this yesterday. And basically, it boiled down to, for us just supporting the bill and not making any, any proposed or counter proposals. And so those are the 4 bills that we are, that the Public Policy and Interagency Committee is looking to support. There is a 5th issue that I did bring up, that a committee member requested additional discussion, and it had to do with Medicaid services that schools can receive reimbursement for, and our desire, or our desire to include 2 clauses in there. One, that the school concurrent statement would be removed, and that 2, non-dedicated devices would be an allowable under the Medicaid plan. And what that means basically is, we all know Jennifer. You've all seen Jennifer use her device. Jennifer technically has what's called a non-dedicated device, and that device is Touch Chat, which is an app. It is an iPad, and it is also a very nice case with a built-in Bluetooth speaker. All of those are off the shelf. All of those right there total in probably less than $1,000. And Medicaid standards right now would prefer to pay for a device between $3,000 and all the way up to $7,000. And so this right here would be a natural cost savings for the taxpayers of Florida. However, that was one of the things that was, that we did put, or that was a member requested additional discussion. And so, again, for the sake of brevity, those were the public policy issues that I wanted to just to bring up. There's other issues that we are working on. However, those were the ones that that we have action on right now. Some other ones are discussion. Paul, did I leave anything else out that was a priority, or that you feel has a sense of urgency?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Next on the agenda is accomplishments, and again, for the sake of brevity, this right here is something that I just wanted to show you guys. And actually, we have a video here. I thought it didn't have music, but just don't show the video. But everybody can watch it in their leisure. And it's a video with some of the stuff that we've done during our Live a Day events. I can tell you, I think that was beyond. That was a very successful events. And one of the things that actually came out as a highlight of it is the need for us to be opportunistic with fundraising, because one of the things that, again, because of who we are, and we're clinicians and program people, one of our ideas was just to make sure it was a successful event, and that we did our demonstrations and our trainings. And then, in hindsight now, one of the things that we do is need to take advantage of those fundraising. And so Eric and I are working on developing a standard operating process in which events like this in the future, Eric would be responsible for the programmatic aspects of it, and then that I would take the lead on, the fundraising, and develop a fundraising and marketing plan for it. And so that was something that, again, a member brought up. I'm grateful of that. And so that is, where we're going. The last thing is our fundraising efforts. Again, we are moving along. There's some things that we needed to do beforehand that we realized, and this right here was a discussion that we had previously about our logo, and then our logo actually being kind of iconic and communicating what we do. We also had a discussion about, our name. However, this right here is one of what we did was we actually developed a little contest on Logo My Way, to where, people can submit logos. We actually provided parameters. One of the parameters that's kind of funny is we said absolutely, we didn't want just wheelchairs. However, you'll see, but I'll actually turn this over, and Matt, if you'd like to give, some more descriptions and, about this.
Okay, so we started this contest just asking for people's input, just ideas for a logo. We asked for it to include assistive technology, different devices, and as Michael said, we said, I'd like to include a wheelchair. That is kind of an iconic symbol for disabilities. By default, over the years, it's kind of fell into that position. We asked for not to just a wheelchair and for it to be a little bit more active. We've got a lot with wheelchairs. We do have some pretty nice logos, with and without, of course. So if you guys want to go to that link, there is a 5-star rating. It doesn't affect the contest, but it definitely gives us a lot of input as far as logos you like, logos you don't like, and kind of help us kind of weed through some of these. We started ranking a few of these that we've gotten a little input here in the office. Some of these, it looks like a little bit of plagiarism from other logos, so we may have to throw some of this stuff out.
The Philadelphia Flyer logo, you mean?
Yes, definitely the Flyers. But if you guys want to look through this, kind of give your input, on a little 5-star rating, it'd be definitely helpful for some of these. We want to include the state of Florida in it just because that's really one of the big foundations of who we are. We are the AT program for Florida specifically. So we want to try to express that through the logo. Do you guys have any questions or thoughts on this?
If I could add before that, we understand that this is a process. And so this is just the first step in looking at this, depending on what what comes in. One of the things that we may do is, like work with the development committee with like top 5 or 6, and then, possibly do a next, another contest to see, okay, we like these, but we want these.
Right.
And so I just wanted to put that out there, that this isn't a final, this right here is a process.
Right. We're really just looking at the final say-so on this to be a big stepping off point for us to continue the process for the logos.
And Matt, since you have it, would you like to go ahead and just review the donation report?
Sure thing. Another thing, let me pull this up. We did kind of just like what we discussed in the donation and the financials as far as the donations from the board. We've kind of just summed it up, totaled it up here. Specifically on the line, the board generated donations. So far, and not putting names out there or anything like that, we don't want to call anyone out, but we've had 2 board members actually donate, 2 of which are recurring donations, so we definitely thank you guys for that. I've also created a link on the FAAST website, faast.org/board, that's got a few little resources in there. One, a specific donation portal. So if you want to, if you're talking with somebody as far as making a donation, you can definitely direct them to that link where they can donate, type in the name, so we can associate those particular donations with a board member. It would be really helpful just for the record-keeping portion of it. Kind of going down the list, the Live a Day event, we just threw a little donation portion on the Live a Day event sign up. We got over $350 in donations from that, and it's been really helpful. I think we've actually gotten more than that, haven't we, Eric?
Yeah, close to between 8 and 1,000, I think, from.
Yeah, because I think some of it was from the previous quarter. So this is just this particular fiscal year. And then staff-generated donations. Some of this is recurring donations, and some of it is travel paybacks and just things that, as far as like online forms and things like that. We've gotten $11 Amazon Smile. I think we just got another deposit. It was around $30, I believe.
For the holiday, yeah.
Yeah, from the holiday quarter. So we definitely got a nice little chunk of change from there. Every dollar counts, of course. Definitely, as far as this board link, just kind of showing you guys here, it's this donation portal right here in the middle. So if you can direct anybody to that, it'll definitely help us out, of course. And also, just kind of showing you guys the, moved. As far as the reporting on the donations, you can kind of get an idea as far as the donations that are coming in, what fund it's going to. A lot of them are going into the rainy day fund or the device loan program. We've got a total of $907 in donations this fiscal year so far. So it's been real helpful. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to add?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the update, Michael, and your staff. We're making progress, and it's really exciting news on the public policy front.
Dr. Harding, I believe Mr. Sullivan was trying to say something there.
I just wanted to add that I do hope that people take a look. I'm actually on the logo design website now, and it is, please take a look at it and get your input. I think our current logo is pretty limiting when it comes to fundraising. Certainly not the only limiting factor, but it is a contributing factor. So as part of the fundraising committee, I ask that you take a look, because I think that we need to update our look and maybe some of our messaging so that we can make people understand the impact that the organization can truly have. So please take a look.
And Paul, let you know after this, do it item, and I'll actually send out an email with the link to all the members, okay? Because that is something that, just to make sure all the members see it.
Indeed, and then I'd like to take a moment, the prerogative of the chair, to reinforce the need for all board members to their highest, whatever they're comfortable with, whether it's $5 or $100, to support the organization. It helps with grants and Michael's capacity to indicate to any donors that all of us support this mission, both in terms of our time and our money. And maybe we could have 100% board participation goal by our June meeting, or certainly by our August meeting. Okay, moving into old business, we have a review of action items. Michael.
Yeah, this right here is our action items. You can see that we achieved most of them, and most of them were actually on the agenda today. The ones that we're still working on, and again, a little bit of this is because of wanting to define or redefine our logo a little bit, is our elevator speeches, and the other one is posting our legislative priorities on the website. This is something that we haven't done. And the reason why is because we actually have a new website. It was just launched in this last quarter. Matt, when did it go live?
December 11th.
December 11th. And then one of the things that we did look at on the website is we looked at data from about 3 to 5 years previously. And one of the things that we noticed is that there was 3 big reasons why people went to our website. And the fourth one kind of fluctuated. And so what I instructed Matt to do is to, let's focus on those 3 things and let's make sure that, you know, that information is there for people to, you know, to get. And then from that, Matt, since we've done that, what has been roughly the increase in the traffic to the website?
Website traffic has went up about 600% to 700%, which is a big jump.
That is significant, and then we should be able to use that to help drive funding and public policy.
Absolutely. We've also had a steady increase in statewide device loan requests as well with the new website. And Hannah is really knocking those out.
Okay, any other questions on old business? Hearing none. We have the new business piece. I just would like to remind members, we do have an executive committee coming up October 25th, but look for a doodle because I've got a little unforeseen conflict and we will need to move that executive committee, but we need to still get it done as quickly as we can. So please look for that for members who are on the executive committee. Any other new business?
This is Isabel, and I'm the new kid on the block, so I'm maybe talking about something that you all have already dealt with. But when I was reading the continuation of operations policy, it reminded me of the fact that I know in my agency, I deal with emergency recovery and in a variety of ways through grants that we receive from the United States Department of Labor. So I'm just putting on the table that I'd certainly be interested in exploring how the different agencies that we represent and possibly some others work on emergency preparedness and response and recovery, and how we can make sure that FAAST is, you know, on board and ready to help or ready to receive help, the agency as well as our clients. So I'm not sure when and how to work on that, but it is something that I think that's very timely.
Well, I would agree with you, and that's, go ahead, Michael.
I'd like, you know, to me, there right there, as the member stated, that right there would be a really good agenda item for the public policy and interagency. And then my recommendation would be to make that request as that is an agenda item on the next PPAC and interagency meeting.
Okay, well then we got an action item there, and is our new board member a part of both of those committees?
I don't think I've been assigned to any committees yet, or if I have, I'm not sure which ones.
Okay,
can deal with
Michael,
that off.
You follow? Right, offline, Michael. Could you follow up on those items, please?
Yes.
All right, very good. Any other new business? Hearing none. Moving into the closure of public comment. Anybody wanting a public comment? We had no written request. Anyone on the phone? Anyone on the phone? None. Our next board meeting is May 15th. Was that correct? Michael and Hannah, May 15th?
Next board meeting.
Yes.
Okay, affirmative there. Is there a motion to conclude this quarterly board meeting for FAAST for February 20th? So we have a motion. Is there a second? I didn't get it, but I gather, okay, there we go, Tom, thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Outstanding. All right, we got it done. Next time we'll do better and not run over. Be well, talk to you soon, and see you at the Legislative Hill.
Thank you, guys. Everybody have a good day.
Bye.